What is up, Spartans? You are listening to HVAC Masters of the Hustle podcast. And here's your host, J-Dub Moneymaker, and welcome to episode 211. First off and foremost, I got to say, what's up to all my Spartans out there? Every single day I wake up, I have threads of emails and text messages of how this podcast is helping you and your company get to the next level, battle those hurdles, get through those obstacles. And that's what I love to hear. And I have a great episode for you all. As you all know, I say it on every episode, I believe we all have Spartans in us. It's my job, my duty, and my obligation to bring that inner beast out in you. And like I said, I have a great episode. You know, as you all know, I got a great friend in this industry, my mentor, Weldon Long. Several months ago, he posted a book from this author, and the book was Freedom from Fear. And I got to tell you, I read the book. I always, take advice from Weldon Long, and it was an absolute amazing book with a lot of nuggets. And I said, man, I'm going to go ahead and reach out to him, and hopefully he'll agree to be on the podcast to drop some seeds and nuggets to all my Spartans that are out there. Let's go ahead and give a massive, huge welcome to the one, the only Mr. Mark Matteson. How you doing, brother?
Good as gold, right as rain, cool as a cucumber.
There we go.
Jason, if we could just get you to come out of your shell, open up a little bit.
Just a little bit, right?
That'd be good.
Here's the crazy thing. When I get on the podcast or I get on stage, this energy comes out, but Mark, I'm an introvert. If you were to find me in like at an event, or, my wife brings me to like one of her work parties or something like that, or a friend's party, I'm the guy in the corner, like away from everyone, not trying to mingle. But then all of a sudden I get on stage or I start talking about something I'm passionate about, and all of a sudden all the nerves come out, so thanks for noticing that, but one thing I got to say is you got a huge name in the industry. A lot of people know who you are. You've made a great impact with the books that you have written. And I only knew of the 3 books that you written, but earlier in our conversation, you have written 8 books. So talk about all right there behind you. Talk about what was the first book that you wrote. What was kind of your mindset going into that? And then kind of your progression through each book that you're writing. And then I believe the last one that you wrote was the Fear Forever, or was
no,
it
As We Think, So We Become.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that there. It's right there.
Right there. And where can they get that book?
On my website, www.sparkingsuccess.net.
All right. So what created this amazing mindset that you wanted to serve people?
Well, I was going to college on a basketball scholarship in 1976. And after a year, I had a 3.0 in college, blood alcohol level. And so, that describes my misspent youth pretty accurately. And so, but after a year, I had a good freshman year. I averaged about 12 points a game, but I picked up Newsweek and Time magazine. They all said the same thing. People were graduating from college and they couldn't find a job, all these baby boomers.
Yeah.
So I called my uncle in Ohio, who's an industrial arts teacher, and I said, "What's the number one skill, blue collar trade?" And he said, "Air conditioning and refrigeration." So I went down to my local Air Force recruiter and tested in the 96th percentile, and they said, "You can have any job you want." So I signed up as an air conditioning refrigeration guy. And so I was a tech for 10 years. And talk about being on the wrong seat on the bus. But the end of my 3rd year of my apprenticeship, I sold more service agreements and projects than the guy that hired full time.
Nice.
And so that's how I got started in sales. I had a mortgage and a baby on the way. And this is me in the Air Force way back when. Back then I was skinny and I had hair. Back then it was disco. Now it's Costco. And so I got into sales full time and just took off and just loved it and was good at it and was one of the top salespeople in the country in HVAC. And then I went to work for a mentor of mine, a guy named Bob Moad. and he taught me the speaking business. And then I met another gentleman named Charlie Tremendous Jones who taught me the book business. And I wrote this little story, Freedom from Fear, and I sent it to Charlie, and he read it, and he called me 2 weeks later, and he said, "If you can write another book like that, you won't need to speak anymore." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, I want to publish it." And I said, "You're a publisher?" And he said, "What do you think Executive Books is, an underwear store?" So, abracadabra, the book just took off, and it sold 50,000 copies in the first, I think, 18 months. And it was translated into 10 languages. It's since sold almost 250,000 copies, which is crazy because I flunked high school English and I got a year of junior college. But
Isn't that
no one
amazing?
told me that I couldn't, so I did, Jason. It's the power of goal achievement. I set a
Absolutely.
goal to write a best-selling book, and then I did.
Absolutely. And it's amazing, what I want to talk about is your journey that you just talked about, from being a top HVAC sales, from going to that, to being a speaker, to publishing a book, to now, selling over 50,000, you said, in 10 different languages. I mean, that's massive right there. I come from, a background of learning disabilities, and English wasn't my strong suit. And really, this year in 2023, I really wanted to dive deep in challenging myself, because this will be the biggest challenge that I have yet to prepare myself for, was writing a book for myself this year. Talking about, you being, English being one of the worst things, subjects for you, how was you able to overcome or conquer that fear of just starting it? Because maybe
Well,
my listeners might be allowing the fear to stop them. And I always say this, and I preach it when I'm on stages: don't allow fear to dictate where your success is going to bring you.
right. Well, okay. First and foremost is I've been setting goals since I was 14. I went to a seminar in high school, and this guy, Bob Moa, changed my life. And I applied the goal setting process to basketball first and then grades. And I went from a 1.8 to a 3.8 with my grades. I went from scrub to star on the basketball team in like 3 weeks, using goal setting and visualization and attitude and self-esteem. And then 20 years later, I went to work for Bob, right? And he taught me the speaking business. But the bottom line was, once I started my speaking business, a mentor of mine pulled me aside and said, "You're not going to be able to take your game to the next level until you have a book." And so I started interviewing hundreds of authors. And I long contended that a mentor is somebody who's done what you want to do and been where you want to go.
Yeah.
And so after a while, the common denominators began to emerge. And then I read Stephen King's book on writing. And he said, basically, pick a certain number of pages every day and a certain amount of time every day. So I chose 3 pages a day or 1 hour, whichever came first. Got up at 5 a.m. every morning. From 5:30 to 6:30, I wrote every single day until the book was done. And that's what I've done with every single book, is once I start a project, I commit to it. It's a little bit more challenging now because I do about 75 talks a year around the globe. And,
Wow.
but I usually carve out 3 weeks in July and another 3 weeks in December to get most of my writing projects done. And during the pandemic, though, because I wasn't traveling as much, I was doing a lot of webinars, but I wrote a couple of books during the pandemic. And so, but here's the first one is the hardest, right? And honestly, it's just a matter of saying to yourself, I'm going to do a certain number of pages every day, even if it's just 1 page a day, right? Stephen King, I think, writes 4 hours a day or 10 pages, whichever comes first. So that's the discipline. You turn off the phone, turn off the news, you go somewhere quiet, you put on your writing outfit, and you go to work. And some days the words just flow and other days they don't. But once you're done, then it's click save. Don't look at it for 3 weeks. Come back, print it out, grab a red pen and start editing. And editing is the hardest part. I will send you a special report I wrote called "So You Want to Be a Writer," and it details all that information, so that'll help you get jump started.
Absolutely.
And once you get the original draft done, then let me know. Send it to me. I'll help you get it edited. I'll write a forward for you. I'll introduce you to all the people that have helped me, get these books done.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And talking about networking, right? The people that, as you guys could see, Mark networking. He was introduced to me. I have him on the podcast, and now he's willing to help elevate my book and write a forward for it. So thank you. I appreciate that. One thing I want to circle back real quick is talking about being a top sales HVAC. What year was that, and what was it that made you the top sales HVAC in the nation?
Well, my first year, I was 150% of plan, but my close rate was only 25%. So my boss was happy with the outcome, but I was working like 80 hours a week.
Oh, yeah.
And I was reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and I got an idea. What if I interviewed the top 20 people in my industry, right? The people who were producing way more than I was. And so I sent them 20 questions, and I sent a list of the other 19 people that I was involved in this survey. And I promised them that if they answered all 20 questions, I would send the results back. So they would get something out of it, in terms of dedicating the time to answer those questions. And 17 people responded. And it was things like, what books do I need to read? What questions do I need to ask? Those kinds of things. And I collated all that, and I sent it back out to everybody. And it ended up being the first article I wrote for Contracting Business. I want to say 91, maybe 1991. So then I did the things that they did, and I got the results they got. My next year, I was 200% of plan and a 50% close rate. Then it was 300% of plan, 75% close rate. And then my last full year, I had a 90% close rate, and I was 400% of plan.
Wow.
And but here's the bottom line: if you do what other people do, right, you'll get the same results. But you have to find out what those common denominators are. In basketball, it's defense, free throws, and rebounds. In football, it's the kicking game, turnovers, and clock management.
Yep.
So I was talking to 400 sales. I do a lot of work outside the industry as well. And I was talking to 400 salespeople from Aflac in Wisconsin. And I had the number one salesperson stand up. And I said, why are you the top producer in all of Wisconsin? And he said, I make 40 calls a day. I quack loudly every day. And I offer my clients a choice of yeses. Now, if you really think about that, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope all of you heard what he just said. If you make 40 calls a day, I don't care what you sell, you're going to be wildly successful.
Yep.
So pick a number. Number two, if you're not proud of what you sell, I think because of my roots as a technician, I was proud to be in this industry. And so I believed in maintenance. And so I believed in comfort in making people and lowering their operating costs.
Yep.
And so I transfer that belief to other people. And then the third thing is when you offer somebody a choice of yeses, which yes would you like? It changes the buying dynamic from if they're going to buy to how.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're dropping bombs right there. Hopefully those listeners are taking notes, because what you just said is absolutely amazing. Yeah, that's what's going to separate you from everyone else. What I think is impressive is you started in HVAC. You were able to become a national speaker. I'm on pretty much the same road that you are on right now. You're just at a much further length than me because you've been doing it much longer. So this is a good episode for me to also pick your brain, because right now you're talking about doing 75 speaking engagements a year. That's something that I would like to do, because it puts your foot in front of more people. People see us behind social media, or they see me on this podcast, and there's only so much passion that you could get out of it. My team throws 4 events. I'm going to be at Epic this upcoming week. I was at Joker Sarah's event last week in Las Vegas. But I'm trying to get myself where I'm not traveling as much to do these on-site trainings, as much as putting me in front of more people, just so I could get my name out there more. And I really like, 75 speaking engagements. How do you do it? I'm just going to start with that. How do you do it? I mean, last year, I think I did 12.
Well, first and foremost, this is a calling. It's not a career or a job. I got sent home from kindergarten when I was 5 years old for singing the Jetster in Gear from West Side Story. When I was 5, my parents knew Mark needed a stage. My whole life, I've been making people laugh. I wasn't the class clown. I was the class wit. Mm-hmm. The class clown was the guy who ran naked across the football field. I was the guy that talked him into doing it. Right? So I was doing a talk to 500 contractors in Florida about 3 years ago. And there was a long line at the book counter. And I used to think that standing ovations were the measure of a great talk, but they're not. The true measure is standing invitations. how many people want to hire you after you speak. So
Mm-hmm.
there was this long line of people buying my books, and that's another measure, is how many books do they buy.
Yep.
And this guy walks up and he goes, "Hey, I really liked your self-defecating humor." And I said, "Oh, self-defecating, huh?" I said, "Well, that's a shitty thing to say." And he goes, "Oh, crap." I said, "Exactly." And I knew what he meant,
Yeah.
bless his heart, right? But I use a lot of humor in my presentations. I use a lot of interaction. I tell lots of stories, and people seem to appreciate that style. And, to the extent that you get the audience involved, and I do that in a lot of different unique ways.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but every time I speak, next week I'm speaking in Vegas.
You're gonna be at Epic?
I'm going to be at EGIA. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, dude. The last time I spoke there, I think I did 2 or 3 sessions, and they were all standing room only.
Nice.
For whatever reason. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying
No,
people seem
it's
to like what I
impressive.
do.
It's impressive what you're doing, and that's why I wanted to get you on this platform, is because I like to surround myself by winners. People that are doing what I want to do, but are doing it in a much more profound way. And again, I hate the saying it's lonely on top of the mountain, because I see myself as a leader right now. And if I say that, it means I'm not doing my job, which is bringing everyone to the top with me. Right. And so I like surrounding myself by winners like yourself and Weldon Long and Drew Cameron and Gary Ellis, because you guys are the ones on top of the mountain, bringing everyone up to the top with you. Right. So if I could sit down and pick your brain and find out what the next level looks like, and I could envision it, there's no reason why I can't have that. Right. For my listeners and you, I don't know how much of my story that but having severe learning disabilities growing up and everything like that, being part of EPA classes, which is special ed classes, a lot of times teachers would ask you, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? And I would tell them, and they would always set my expectations from what I wanted to down here. So that's how it was my whole life. So, understanding what's possible, not letting other people dictate the amount of success that you could have, and envision it and then implement it, right? A lot of people will envision it, but then they won't start the implementation after. Talk about
Right.
the importance of you being on stage and the importance of people going back and implementing what you're talking about.
Well, Jason, I believe that stories are sticky, right? And sometimes some of the best lessons can be contained in stories. So when I want to say this, I was 34 when I did this. Again, I'd read Think and Grow Rich, and I sat down and I wrote out a letter to myself, my life in 5 years. And it was ridiculous, because I'd just taken a sales job. And so what I wrote down was absurd. In fact, when I got done writing it, I looked around and I thought, I hope no one sees this, because they'll laugh at me. But it said things like, I'm an international speaker, best-selling author, travel the world. And I listed all these different people: Ken Blanchard, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Bob Moad, Lou Tice, all these guys. And these guys are all friends. And I wrote it all out, and I described this thing I got it in 1 page. And I typed it all up, and I laminated it, and I put it in the shower in the man cave. And I read it every single day for 15 months. And then we moved, and it got put in a box, and I didn't see it for 6 years. And my wife said, "Honey, you need to go clean out the garage and get rid of some of those boxes." And so I was going through it, and I found it, and I pulled it out, and it was exactly the life I was leading. I'd written Freedom from Fear. My business has taken off. Okay. So most people don't know where they want to be in 5 years. And if you have the courage to sit down and write out what you want your life to look like, and make sure that in addition to the what and the where, you list the how, the why. The why is huge.
That's the biggest thing right there. Let's talk about the why real quick. Once you establish and understand your why, the sky's the limits, right? And your why is different than everyone. Elaborate on the why real quick, and really understanding it and why that is so important.
Well, whys pull you to the future. They're the reasons you want something. When I was in the 8th grade, I got cut from the basketball team, and I was so mad. I wanted to prove Kim Wilson wrong. He was the coach. One of two things happened.
His name to this day.
Oh yeah, Kim Wilson. He taught history. Hated that guy, and I was going to prove him wrong. And one of two things happen when a 12-year-old kid gets cut. He either quits and takes up the saxophone, or says, I'm going to get mad, and he goes to work.
Yeah.
And I went to work, and I grabbed a hold of a guy named Kenny Christensen. He was the best player at our high school, and at our junior high, I'm sorry. And so I said, Kenny, how did you get so good? He said, no one's ever asked me that before. He said, well, I shoot 2 hours every single day, and I go to Bob Hubrig's basketball camp every summer. And I said, would you bring me a brochure? And he said, I will. And he did. And from that day forward, I shot 2 hours every day, rain or shine. And I said to my father, I have to go to this basketball camp. And he said, this isn't until next July. He said, good, you'll have plenty of time to earn half the money. So I mowed lawns and I washed windows because we were poor. I didn't know we were poor. And so I went to camp and I found out what to practice in the 2 hours, and I made the team the next year. Now I grew 9 inches. That didn't hurt. But all things considered, I'd have made the team regardless because I paid the price in advance. And I used that system, that process of reaching out to people who had done what I want to do and been where I want to go. And so I found at every chapter of my life, I found the Kenny Christensens to help me along the way.
Yeah.
And then I stumbled across Charlie Tremendous Jones listening to an audio program of his one day, and I called him up out of the blue. And Charlie said, you'll be the same person in 5 years except for two things: the people you associate with and the books that you read. So what are you reading and why? And is it in alignment with your goals? And who you hanging around and why? And is it okay? That's the name of my podcast, Mark Matteson on Books and People, because I believe so strongly in those two concepts that the people in the books are going to dictate where you end up in 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And that's a powerful thing that what I like to do establish when I'm on site. I do a lot of on-site trainings, and day one, what I like to do is bring the whole team in, all departments, everyone all in. And we talk about what their goals is, their 1 year, their 3 year, and their 5 year plan. And we make vision boards. And then on the second day, that's their homework assignment. And I want them to go back home with their kids, and I want it to be a family project. And then the next day they come in and they talk about the experience of what it was like to create this vision board with their family. And then also they go through business and personal, what they want to achieve. And then what we do is I tell the business owner is we're going to hang these up in the training room or throughout the office, in the halls, whatever it is. But when your team comes out here, comes to the office, it needs to be in front of them every day. What you all need to do as supervisors and managers is you all have to hold your team accountable, and you have to make sure that you celebrate their wins. So in 6 months, 3 years, 1 year, whatever those goals are, you should, as a leadership team, make sure that your team marks them off, right? Take videos. It's all about those small accomplishments, those small goals that keep moving you forward. And they don't have to be massive goals, right? It's just small little increments, 1% every single day. That's all we're looking for, is progression. Talk about the importance of progression.
Well, what you're talking about is what the Japanese call Kaizen. You improve 1% a day for 90 days and you're twice as valuable.
Yeah.
So I take my audiences through a 1 year goal setting process where they write 5 goals down on a 3x5 card, and then choose one goal that's more important than all the rest. And then do something I call the hour power. And the hour power is really simple. So let's say your goal is to increase your sales by 30 or 40% this next year. Okay. Let's just choose 30%.
Okay.
Right. That's a stretch goal. It's reasonable, but doable. So fine. Now you have a sales goal. So the first 20 minutes of the hour of power, you're going to read a sales book, and it doesn't matter which sales book it is. You can read How to Sell Anything to Anybody by Joe Girard, or See at the Top by Zig Ziglar. It doesn't matter what the book is.
Mm-hmm.
I have an ebook called Sparking Sales Success: How to Enjoy 75% Close Ratio. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So, but 20 minutes is the magic number, right? And in the 20 minutes, you're going to get at least one good idea. And you do it every single day for 90 days, right? The second 20 minutes is you're going to write that goal at the top of the page of your journal. And I'm assuming journal. If you don't, you need to get one.
Mm-hmm.
And write the goal at the top of the page, and then just sit there and think. George Bernard Shaw said, I've become rich and famous by thinking a couple of times a week. And most people don't think. They memorize, they read, but they don't think. They don't turn on that machine. And the third the third piece is the one that pulls it all together. What are the 6 most important things I need to do today? There was a guy named Ivy Lee. He was hired by Charles Schwab at U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh in the late 20s. And Lee was a consultant. And Schwab said, look, I know how to make steel, but if you can show me a way that I could be more effective, I'll pay you whatever the idea is worth. And Lee said, I can do that. He said, take out a legal pad and a pencil. Write down the 6 most important things you need to do today. So he did that. He said, now estimate how long you think each task is going to take. And he did that. Then he said, now prioritize it. Which one's number 1, which one's number 2, and so on. Now, tomorrow when you come into the office, do number 1 and don't go on to number 2 until you've completed it or delegated its completion to someone else. Do it every single day for 30 days. Once you're convinced of its efficacy, teach it to all of your managers, have them do it for 30 days, and send me a check for whatever you think the idea is worth. In 1929, Ivy Lee got a check for $25,000, which is $250,000 in today's money.
Yeah.
Because Schwab said from a personal effectiveness standpoint, it was the single most important idea he'd ever come across. So now if you think about combining all 3 of those things, what's your number 1 goal? You're reading a book in alignment with, you're going to have 90 ideas from all that reading. You'll have read 2 or 3 books by the time you get to the end of the 3 months.
So I got
the second piece is you'll have thought about your goal 90 times. And there's no way you can't move forward. And the third piece, of course, is action. Because if you don't take action, then it's just a wish. It's not a dream. It's not a goal.
Absolutely.
So that process, read, think, plan, is so simple, and most people don't do it. I do it every day. I've been doing it for over 20 years. And I get most of the important things done by 2:00 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Then I usually take a nap or go to the gym or watch a movie or, right? Because basically I'm lazy. I'm self-employed. When I call in sick, I know I'm lying. I'm the worst boss I ever had.
Oh, that's funny.
But I also take 6 weeks off a year. I'm taking my wife to London in August.
Yep. And talk about that, because that's what I do as well. So last year I was on the road 175 days, on-site after on-site after on-site, East Coast to the West Coast, nonstop. Talk about the importance of disconnecting. Every single year, the last 3 years I've been doing national training, pretty much from Thanksgiving till about mid-January, I take off. So about 60 days is what I take off. Vacation, enjoy the holidays with the family, and just disconnect, get away. Talk about the importance of doing that.
Well, first and foremost is some of your best ideas are going to come when you've completely disconnected.
Yep.
Right. And all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Yep. We all need time to recharge our batteries and our energy. And so I chose 3 weeks in July and 3 weeks in December when my kids were young, because that's when they were home. But it also seems to be the slowest time of year for me for whatever reason. So now over the years that changed a little bit, and people kept encroaching on that 3 week period of time period. So I have to plan those in chunks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people think that the traveling is glamorous and all that, and it's not.
No.
But the thing is, I love every part of it. And if you don't love every part of that process, then the traveling is going to be a grind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not for me. I love every part of it. Oh, I don't like TSA. I'll be honest. That's the only part of it that is so freaking annoying. Okay. But,
all right,
but
talk
I just
about,
smile and I let them pat me down and do all the weird things. They're always like, rubbing your thighs and all the weird stuff that happens. But then I go to the Delta Lounge and I have a nice breakfast and I read a book, and I read 2 books a week. I have for 30 years, and that makes up for the year of junior college that I had.
Yeah.
So but I think it's absolutely vital that we recharge those batteries and stay connected. And during the pandemic, my travel schedule slowed way down. I was still working. I was doing a lot of webinars, but it turns out my wife is really a nice person. After 43 years, I came to the conclusion that I married up.
That's fine. So, you and Wally said the same thing. Once the pandemic hit and I stopped my travels, man, me and my wife have a lot in common.
Who knew?
Right?
Hey, you got to understand how smart my wife is, though. On our first date, way back in November of '79. She said, "Do you think the plaid shirt goes with the striped pants?" And on the second date, she goes, "Do you have a different shirt?" Because I was wearing the same shiny disco shirt I was wearing on the. Oh, just so you know, disco is this thing that we had back in the '70s. Yeah. Anyway, so, and then on the third date, she goes, "Why don't we go shopping?" Yeah.
Why don't we go shopping? Let me ask you,
I clean up nice. I'm wearing a Stetson, for God's sake.
I know, right? Let me ask you a question, Mark. With all your successes and everything, what is your goals for 2023? Like what is your pinpoint? What do you want to do in 2023 that's like your ultimate goal?
Well, I have a very specific financial goal that I'm shooting for, which will essentially be the best year I ever had. And last year was the best year I ever had, and I want to improve that by 20% this year. I'm 8 pounds away from my goal.
All right, look at that. Look
Um,
at
I
I
feel
see
great
those
at
muscles.
248 with a 36-inch waist. So
Woo.
yeah, and I'm 65 years old, but I'm in better shape than most guys I know that are my age. And I'll go to the gym later on today. Um, so I have some wellness goals, very specific. I've got international travel goals, right?
Yeah.
And so I've got another. I'm working on another book right now with a speaker friend of mine, Kevin Knievel.
Nice.
So we're taking Dale Carnegie's principles. There's 30, our 30 favorite, and he's writing 15. I'm writing 15. So, and here's the thing: I'm never going to retire. Okay, all my mentors, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, uh, Bob Moawad, Lou Tice, all those guys, Charlie Jones, they all lived to be in their 80s and 90s, and they worked right up until the day they died. And I believe they did that because what they were doing was a calling. It wasn't a job. It wasn't even a career. And so I love what I do. I figure I have 20 more books in me easy.
Absolutely.
And I want to be that guy at 90, 95 going, okay, now what do I want to do next?
What do I want to
I'll
do
become
next?
this old Jewish guy that goes, I'll have a celery soda, matzo ball soup, and a pastrami on rye. That's all I want. I'm going to be that old Jewish guy at the deli.
I love it. You got to enjoy what you do. Every day I wake up, I enjoy what I do. I'm very passionate, to leave my why, which is my family, to be on the road 175 days, to make a huge impact across the nation, to show people what's possible in this industry. And then even the bigger goal of mine, my wife and I, we adopted both of our boys, age 7 and 2, both met them at 8 months old. And our bigger goal of being a national trainer, and I didn't notice this when I started, was I could actually give back a lot to kids that are in the adoption agencies. So as we continue to build HVAC Masters of the Hustle, percentages of our training, swag, everything goes to help kids in the need. So in the adoption system, because too many kids need love,
That's
So
really cool.
absolutely. So go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you can see this or not. These are my 3 boys. So
Nice.
Colin and Evan are our biological sons, and Larad is our adopted son. He's African American.
Nice.
He was 16 when we adopted him. His dad used to beat him up. It was a bad deal. So we went to Child Protective Services and made him part of our family, and we put him through college, and he's in the Army now, and he's doing really well. He bought his first house 2 years ago. My wife's a realtor. She helped him do that.
Speaks volumes of the character you and your wife are, because it takes.
Well, right back at you, Slick. I mean, So, but I wanted to tell you a story because this is, to me, this is a nice way to kind of summarize everything we've been talking about. In 2003, I was the closing speaker at the Radiant Panel Association in Sacramento, and the opening speaker was SAC. Okay,
Yeah.
And so the opening speaker was a guy named Dan Holohan, and Dan was a pretty famous guy in this industry in the Northeast anyway. And he was a plumbing. Most of his clients were plumbers and Radiant Panel folks. And so I went and introduced myself because he'd written, I think, 5 or 6 books up to that point. And I only had the one, Freedom from Fear. And so I introduced myself, and he goes, "Hey, you've got a book, right?" He was like signing books, and it was like a pre-show thing. He said, "Sit down. We'll sell some of your books, and we'll get to know each other." So I asked him a really simple question. I said, "What drives you? You're on the road all the time. You're writing all these books. What drives you?" And he said, "I have 4 daughters, and I concluded that if I could put 4 girls through college doing what I loved, writing and speaking, my life will have meant something." And a light went on, Jason, in my head. At that time, my kids were in elementary school and junior high. We had just adopted Larod. And I thought, that's it. If I can put 3 boys through college, that writing and speaking, that would be something. And that was 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And that became my gigantic, big, hairy, audacious why. Okay. And everything else came from that, right? Because I had a really powerful reason for wanting to succeed.
Yeah.
Because if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life.
Yeah.
And I love what I do.
That's my beautiful.
That's a beautiful family there, cowboy.
Oh, absolutely, man. They're my blessings right there. And everything I do for them, I tell everyone I'm not here for financial freedom. I'm here for generational wealth. So for instance, I have a plan in my life, which I have a beautiful brand new house in Rockland, which 5 years old. But my plan was live here for 5 years, which we just hit. I'm buying a brand new house. I get the keys in 21 days. I'm keeping this as a rental. This is going to be my son's house, who's 7 years old. And then
Nice.
the new house that we're moving into, it's double sized, 3,500 square feet. That's going to be my other boy's house. So I'm already working on their houses. 5 more years, it will be my forever home because I don't want them to worry about anything. So in 10 years, I'm going to be done working for my kids and I'm going to be working on my grandkids. That's my goal.
There you
That's
go.
my ambition. Absolutely.
All right. So let me give you some fatherly advice.
Yes,
okay?
sir.
Because this is what I did with my kids. And by the way, all 3 of my boys have great jobs, beautiful wives, lovely families. They're all very successful, super proud. I told them when they were in their 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, your future's so bright it burns my eyes. You're going to go so much farther than I ever did in school, sports, and business. And I said that to them every single day for years. And then one day they believed me. But the turning point as a parent came for me when Colin was 8 and Evan was 4. I came up with this idea of the 2 questions. And this is in the book, Freedom from Fear. Every night I would read to them. We'd say our prayers. I'd tuck them in and I would ask them 2 questions. What was the most fun you had today? And what are you looking forward to tomorrow? And I did that every day for 30 days. And the 31st day I forgot, and Colin comes running downstairs. I thought the house was on fire. I said, son, what's wrong? He says, you forgot to ask me the 2 questions. I said, I'm sorry, buddy. What was the most fun you had? What are you looking forward to tomorrow? Now think about that. One is memory, the other is imagination. And kids are almost never allowed to even think in those terms.
Yeah.
So then I did it. So fast forward a year, Evan's 5. It's Christmas night. And I knew what he was going to say. What are you looking forward to tomorrow? Playing with Nintendo, because that's what they wanted, and that's what we got him. And I said, what are you looking forward to tomorrow? And he goes, playing with the box the refrigerator came in. Because I'm a romantic. I got my wife a refrigerator. That's what she wanted. Did big double wide, And I go, what? He said, yeah, I'm going to put my sleeping bag in there and spend the night. I said, like a homeless guy? He goes, whatever. He goes, you want to put your bag in there too, Dad? So there we were, like a couple of homeless guys in a van down by the river, right? Just sleeping in a box. And he was so happy. It was the happiest I've ever seen him. And fast forward 8 years, now he's 12. I added a 3rd question. When do you feel the most loved? When do you feel the most appreciated? And he paused for a second. He said, when you ask me the 2 questions at night. What ends up happening was I turned my kids into little men who felt good about themselves, had a high self-esteem and high levels of confidence, but they also were little goal setters. Memory, imagination, memory, imagination. And
Love
that
it.
simple discipline, I've been telling that story for 20 years. And I can't tell you, I had a guy come up to me in Houston. I spoke at Dyke and Amana event last week to a couple hundred people in Houston. And I had a guy come up to me and said, he said, you probably don't remember me, but 20 years ago, you spoke at Gensco in Tacoma. I said, yeah, I remember that gig. And he said, you told that story about the two questions with your kids. And he said, I started doing that every single night, and it completely changed the way my kids performed, A, and the quality of the relationship that we had, B. He said, I never had a chance to thank you for that, but it was literally life-changing for my family.
Super rewarding.
So, my friend, I am out of time because I've got to prepare for the next thing I've got to do. This was so much fun. And I'm going to make a prediction, Jason. Your future's so bright it burns my eyes. So get started on that book, and we'll see if we can't get it out to the world so you can put a dent in the universe.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. It was an honor to get you in the hot seat. Until next time. Boom. I know you got to